here at Delhi Park in Picton in the county of Prince Edward. We are removing an invasive species called Himalayan Balsam. To identify Himalayan Balsam, you can look for these large, somewhat serrated leaves, and they have a reddish stem at the base of each leaf. They also have a very large pink flower head that looks something like a snapdragon. And when the seed heads from the flowers are mature, they look like this. And when they're completely ripe, they will explode when they're being touched. There is a native plant that has a very similar flower and seed head. This plant is called jewelweed. It has an orange flower that's a little bit smaller than our Himalayan balsam. And as you can see, the lobes on the leaf are far less serrated and a little round. Now this plant is a native species. It's a very important species for our riparian ecosystems. So you might see this if you decide to pull Himalayan balsam, but you can leave it there because it's a good native plant. So Himalayan balsam can be a very aggressive species in our natural riparian ecosystems here in Prince Edward County and in the Quinte Conservation Watershed. The Latin name for Himalayan balsam is Impatiens glandulifera. Now, I mention that because it does go by a number of different common names. So many people may not know it as Himalayan balsam, but it unfortunately still is sold in some places under a variety of different common names. So when you are choosing plants for your garden, look for the scientific name of Impatiens glandulifera so that you can avoid planting this plant, which may become invasive in your local creeks and shorelines. So as mentioned earlier, the Himalayan balsam's flowers ultimately go to seed in a pod that looks something like this, that normally will explode when it is mature. So as you can see, I'm touching this pod and it's not exploding, so this one isn't ripe yet. But if you do happen to come across one that has much larger, wider pods, they're probably mature. And if you're at that stage in the plant's growth, you probably don't want to pull it and you want to wait to the next year. Because when the pods explode, they launch the seeds a very, very far distance, and that can cause you to actually end up with more Himalayan balsam than you started with. So the best time to pull it is when it's still flowering or before it's flowering or before the seeds have fully matured. In terms of the removal of the Himalayan balsam, we can just look and see what our volunteer Kat here is doing. So she's grabbing the base of the stem and pulling up the Himalayan balsam very gently to get hopefully the root if possible. But if the Himalayan balsam snaps off before you can pull up the root, it's not a huge deal because this plant is an annual. So that means it only grows for 1 year and it only sprouts from seed. So in terms of protecting yourself when you're removing Himalayan balsam, you will need long sleeves, gloves, long pants, and preferably some sturdy boots. Now, the Himalayan balsam itself isn't particularly noxious. At the very least, you could get away with just using gloves. But as you can see behind us, there's quite thick grass and there's other plants in there that are quite noxious, such as wild parsnip. You might be able to see a little bit of it behind me. So those plants can cause a noxious reaction on your skin, which is why you want to cover as much as possible of your skin that might come into contact with them. You also might be in habitats where ticks are present, and so you'll want to have clothing covering your skin as well as bug spray if you can, because that will deter the ticks and make it much harder for them to bite into you. So the best way to dispose of the Himalayan balsam that you've collected is to essentially smush it up as much as you can and put it in garbage bags like this one. That way, in case you do have any seeds that are viable, they'll be contained. And what you can do as well to kill the plant is leave it out in the sun for a period of time until it's completely dead. When you dispose of it, you shouldn't just throw it directly, as mentioned, into the municipal compost. You should wait till the plant is dead and then dispose of it from there. So normally when the Himalayan balsam is removed, it leaves a disturbed, exposed patch, which could allow the balsam to spring up again if seeds are present. So what we're doing at this site is we've got a bunch of shrubs and trees, and we're planting them in the exposed areas where we've removed Himalayan balsam so that hopefully they will compete for resources in that space and shade it out and prevent it from coming back to a significant degree. To learn more about Himalayan balsam and how you can help manage it, check out the Ontario Invasive Plant Council's management document for Himalayan balsam.